Having delivered a perfect performance on leg 6 from Aarhus to The Hague, 11th Hour Racing team increased their overall winning margin over Holcim PRB to 2 points. The overall trophy was far from decided, but with just one leg to go, their win was a significant step in the right direction for Charlie Enright's team. Meanwhile, GUYOT Environment Team Europe, who enjoyed an emotional return to the race after being dismasted on leg 4, delivered an impressive win in the import race in The Hague. 11th Hour Racing team had played a key part in getting GUYOT back on the water by selling them their spare mast. So at the start of the final leg to Genoa, everyone was happy. But 15 minutes after the start, this was not the case. During the import start of the leg, GUYOT, who were the giveaway boat, T-boned the American team, who were on starboard, causing huge damage to the back end of the boat. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but both teams were forced to return to port.
We did our best to avoid a situation that was quite clearly unavoidable, and we protested them, and the umpires black flagged them, and that's part of it. We ended up having to suspend racing. The boat is in a state. We don't know what state that is, but all of those are details. I mean, the important thing, for everybody is that everybody is physically safe and okay in what was a pretty, traumatic situation. And exactly where we go from here is a little uncertain. We're still in the diagnostic phase, just trying to figure out the extent of the damage, what that means, what the timeline is, what our fate might be from a competitive standpoint. But the dust hasn't really settled on any of this yet, so we're just kind of processing the information as it becomes available.
Yeah, I take all my responsibility. It's our fault, so for sure. I'm a lot of shame now. Just after a big help from them, we break them both. So.
At this stage, we don't know what the outcome will be, but this looks like a massive blow to a team who dared to hope that the 2023 ocean race would be theirs. Just before they set off from Aarhus, I spoke to team member Jack Boutell about how the team were keeping the show on the road and how demanding the detailed checks and procedures are. And while we didn't talk about catastrophic situations like this, his comments give a good idea of just how fine a line teams run to stay in the game.
Going now, 30, 32, max keel.
Jack, nice to see you. First of all, congratulations on another leg win. That must be quite satisfying.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's I think it's always the hard thing with these around the world races. You'll get to the end of the race and you'll be like in a good place to start the race in terms of boat preparation and what you've learnt, and it's sort of always the biggest obstacle is how much you can learn in the time frame and what you can do to the boat, especially with this boat being a prototype and the first time this class has gone around the world crewed. So I think everything's getting pushed harder, and we saw from the Transat leg that pretty impressive numbers are possible, and what the boats are capable of, and I think it's really the beginning in terms of what is going to be possible in a crewed sense.
How steep has that learning curve been? I mean, you mentioned so many things are new, and of course they are, but I just wonder how difficult it's been to actually keep up with what you need to know.
No, there's been plenty, and I think, from many points of view, obviously these are our version 2 foils, so that's been a development since we've sort of been sailing the boat since it was built, and we'll keep growing and keep evolving, and then it's obviously a decision of where the class goes in the next generation of this cycle in terms of they're going to accept T-rudders, foiling rudders, so the boats are fully flying. That'll obviously be another mountain to climb again, and all that sort of thing. But a lot of this race, I think, is obviously it's come from a single-handed class, which has now become a crewed class. Everything's getting pushed more for longer distances and longer time, sort of always on it, I guess. There's obviously times single-handed where you have to, the boat's not being sailed at full potential because you just can't physically do it. So the boats are being pushed more. There's more load on the gear. I think the fact that the boats are sort of semi-flying, with the fact there's no T-rudder, so the slamming is very violent, and we're sort of finding a lot of issues around that in terms of load casing. What we're seeing, spikes, dynamic loading is a lot worse, I guess, than what was maybe originally thought on paper. And just the nature of that relentless abuse, I guess, is always a challenge for any boat. But obviously a prototype boat where you're trying to do the lightest thing possible that can, be flying 4 meters above the water and crash down doing 30 knots. It's big loads, and it's definitely been a challenge. I think probably everyone knows the first few legs for us anyway, and for a lot of the fleet has been some big challenges. We've learned a lot now. In the last leg, it's sort of the path we went down to try and resolve that, and just the time as well it takes to iron those issues out. The last leg we really had nothing, besides the normal wear and tear, but in terms of actual, performance issues, there was nothing, which is, a fantastic place to be and really positive going forward.
In the past, in previous races, when you talk about slamming, the focus of attention was generally on delamination in the hull and soft patches and structural failures there. Is that, but then you were just talking about impact loads, and I'm assuming that you're talking about the extra loads that go into all the deck gear and the rest of it when everything comes to a flying stop. Is that the more significant side now? Are we sort of at a point where delamination, yes, it's still an issue, but it's not quite the same crisis thing that it was before? Yeah,
definitely. I think there's a few factors in. I think from a structural point of view, a slamming zone on a normal yacht without foils is probably the front third. We're now talking aft of the keel.
Really?
Is the sort of areas where, the boats, the hull is now monolithic, basically until just after the keel for slamming. And then there's a different structural layout for those areas, and we're getting issues as far back as a metre in front of the rudders. So you can see how much the boats are flying, and the fact that there's no T-rudder, I guess, to just keep that flight a bit more stable. That sort of semi-flying in the back of the boat touching down is sort of the big one structurally that has been difficult. And then I think on the gear as well, it's not one slam, it's that constant slamming that these boats, the motion of these boats are having, that it's really fatiguing on all the gear, especially deck gear, and it's stuff that you can't see, and I'm sure it's things that ended up with PRB's failures and lots of issues like that. Metal fatigue is a very hard thing to know about or to follow, without microscopically testing it or testing it to failure. You have no real way of actually knowing what's going on in there. So it's a hard one to manage, and that's issues we're coming up with, and they're new issues that it's all part of learning and the game around that.
How do you, when it comes to, I mean, I've been here for the last couple of days watching them doing the work. The scissor lift is going up and down all daylight hours, just constantly going.
Yeah.
How do you prioritise the work you're doing? I mean, obviously, if you've got a job list of broken kit, then obviously you have to do that.
Yeah.
But assuming that, like on this day, you haven't got too much broken kit, what are the priorities? How do you sort of work through it? Because do you have a list, or do you look at it and go, well, we got this much time ashore, so we could do all of this? Is there
yeah, there is a process, and it's a process that we worked on a lot in Brazil, and we sort of fairly drastically changed how we went about looking at it. I think the beginning of the race, it was a bit of maybe try and do everything attitude, and actually we sort of went maybe back to a bit more of a let's keep it simple and focus on what we think anyway is important. Because obviously, you know, it's a prototype boat. The job list is endless. You could leave the boat on the dock and you could fill every day for the next 3 years with stuff to do. It's not an issue. There's always things to do, and I think we've looked at it from, you know, obviously the first half of the race was difficult for us, and you know the objective was to really simplify it and look at it and say, right, what were the main issues we had that really affected performance or safety? Because that was, you know, at the end of the day, when you have structural or appendage issues, that is, you know, a safety factor. So we looked at that and addressed those in real detail, and to the detail of not just doing it, testing it, making it fail, and then really delving into the deeper issue and resolving that, and then basically from that, you know, logically stepping up and up and up. And then I think we obviously time is always the biggest factor, and you know, looked at that a bit more in, you know, not a time frame until the boat leaves the dock on start day, but you know, rein it back a bit and say, okay, we want the 4 days leading up to the start to be perf mode, so the boat, there's no big jobs going on, because all that affects the sailing team, how our relationship is with the tech team, how much we can sail it, how much time can be on board, and we looked at that a bit more, and I think that's been a big difference in you know, how prepared the boat is to go racing, because I think there's two things of a boat prepared to go sailing and a boat prepared to go racing, and it's those little details, and something, you know, myself not having been on the last few legs has been with the rotations that we've sort of planned. I've been able to spend a lot more time in those little details, which has been really, really good, because you know, the hard thing now is there's 4 sailors on board. You know, I think when you have a team of 10 sailors or more, you all between you have a lot more time to do a lot more things, whereas there's only 4 of us now, so each of us has a quarter of the workload, and that's off the water, comms, physical preparation, mental preparation, briefings, whatever else is going on. So actual time that we have is very, very, very little compared to the last race, and that's been a challenge, and I think something that probably no one really anticipated enough. And you know, we're learning from that obviously, but that's been a big one, and having you know, I think we have a really great tech team and a shore team, but you know, the difference between knowing technically how to prepare the boat well and having someone that's actually sailed on the boat, knowing what all those little niggles are, what really is, you know, first night, 2 a.m, that doesn't work, or that's not in the right place. It's like, you know, drives you up the wall and is really heavy when you're offshore, and just dealing with those little things is a big gain at the end, I think, in performance.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
How much do you think, I mean, this is a very steep learning curve for everybody, the steep increase in performance for the boat. How big a deal is this race, do you think, for the future for the IMOCA class? How much is this going to change the game going forwards?
I think depending a bit obviously on how the class looks at it, and obviously they have a set of rules that change every 4 years, which is basically the Vendée Globe cycle. So it's going to be a bit dependent on their rules going forward, because obviously they can limit what you can do a lot more, or they can open the door and floodgates sort of thing, I guess, which, you know, and it's a big class now, you know, there's 40 to 50 projects, so you have to think of, you know, the top unlimited, but not unlimited, but top budget teams down to, you know, the little guy with nothing, just trying to do it for the adventure or whatever it is, or, you know, it's a completely different spectrum that you have to, and you have to appreciate everyone's project. You can't just cater to, you know, the big ones, because, you know, the heart of the class is the Vendée Globe, which is, you know, a human adventure at the end of the day, and you can't say no to the guy for other people still wanting to do that. So it's a difficult one, but I think I think personally now looking at it, I think for 2028, I guess if you were going into it with a full 4 to 5 year project and you had everything to do it well, I guess in any format, I think for me doing the ocean race is critical in terms of boat preparation. I think to win the 2028 Vendée, doing the ocean race is a really important factor, just from firstly a boat preparation point of view, just to know that your boat's solid. I think now there's such complicated boats that there's so many things to deal with and learn and make reliable. Having already done around the world is fantastic. The other thing is doing around the world with crew, with having that different input, that high level of competition. It's a quicker learning process. It's not just your input or the skipper of the project's input. It's everyone else's. Racing other boats, it's that sort of tight all the time. And single-handed racing, I think sometimes you can roll someone, but you're not sure. Maybe the guy's asleep, and who knows. Whereas at least crewed, it's like, okay, surely unless we find they've had an issue, they're going flat out like us. So I find it a lot more stable ground, I guess, to know really deep down that you're fast or not. And all the things that go around. I think commercially it's interesting. Obviously, a lot of projects are French based, but there's a lot these round the world races can offer, and I think it's a very important factor if you have any Vendée project, but for sure if you want to win.
And look at it the other way, and from a sort of sailor's point of view, do you think this could be a turning point for the ocean race?
Yeah, it's for sure. I think, having done the last two in the Volvo 65, which is obviously a very different class and a very different race then, it was sponsored by Volvo still. It was, sort of probably the more Anglo-Saxon history of the race, whereas now it's, effectively, except us, quite a French race it's become. It's moved into a French circuit. For sure, it's different. It's a challenge. I sort of thought after the last race, where do you go? What do you do? Do you join a class that's successful, but you're going to have to also deal with the limitations around their calendar and things like that, or do you go out on your own and hope it works with either another One Design boat or creating another class like the Volvo 70 or the Open 70 back in the day? So nothing's ever easy. I think these boats are fantastic boats. They're a spectacle. They fly. They're super interesting for the sailors. They're slightly difficult at times to take people sailing, just of the cockpit layout compared to maybe the 65 where there's a huge open cockpit. But when someone does come sailing on the boat, it's a real experience. It's a phenomenal experience to feel a boat flying. And I think this race has been a bigger success than probably a lot of sailors I've spoken to thought it would have been, I guess. And I think it's been an eye-opener for the French teams, I guess, that are sort of used to that single-handed, start in one place, take the start line, no drama, I guess, around it, and then you go and do the race. Whereas here, you've got a lot more engagement, and then, things like import races and leg starts where you go around a little course, then you go, like all those sort of things. I think everyone was quite skeptical of, but having seen it, everyone's really excited about it. And that's obviously a strong case, and I think people are now understanding the reasons to do it, especially bigger teams wanting to win the next Vendée or even a project ocean race just itself is still obviously a huge thing, and still the pinnacle of crewed racing offshore. So yeah, I think it's been positive and will continue to be positive.
Good. Well done.
Thanks.
So far, good luck.
Yep.
Keep it up. Just 1 point.
Yep.
Fingers crossed.
Yep. No,
Okay.
definitely.
Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thanks,
Cheers.
man. Nice to